From B Media Production, this is B Podcasting. Engage your audience with podcasts.
Hi, and welcome to episode 5 of season 2. I'm Nick Schildberger. This episode, we hear from a true Aussie entrepreneur out of Perth who understands the true value podcasting brings for long-term gains. He's wrapping his company's brand around a brilliantly produced podcast on customer experience. But before that, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host and podcast aficionado, Chris Ashmore.
G'day, Nick. Well, it seems like eons ago, but the Australian Podcast Awards were held since our last episode. You were there. Peter Letts was there. What did you think of it?
I thought it was good. It was a good night. Well done by the guys. Only the second year, so it's improving every year and becoming a bigger event.
Can I say something a little controversial?
Yes, go ahead.
That is, I think there was some podcasts that probably should have been finalists in some categories and perhaps some finalists that shouldn't have been in those categories. Now, being a judge, it is controversial for me to say, and maybe it's saying something about my fellow judges, but at the end of the day, anyway, for anyone, any company doing a podcast, it's not about the awards. I mean, I shouldn't even have to spell that out. The idea of doing a podcast is for your audience. And if you get an award or if you don't, it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, it is subjective to those who are judging. So do your podcast, do it for your audience. Don't worry about the awards. And if you get one, well, congratulations.
All right, so to today's interview, who did you speak to, Chris?
Well, Nick, have you walked out of a store lately and noticed an iPad set up at the door asking you to rate your experience before you leave that store?
I have. Just yesterday at my local council-run gym and pool setup, there was smiley faces and sad faces ranging from green for the happy and red to the not happy, and they were asking me how I felt as I walked in and out of the gym.
Did you touch one?
I didn't, but my son, who actually was the one who participated in the sports class, did press the smiley face on the way out.
Well, that's good. Now, you asked me who we're interviewing. Well, it's an initiative by a Perth entrepreneur called Michael Momsen. He's the CEO and founder of RateIt. His brand really is all about improving customer service, and so he's teamed up with our friend Adam Jaffrey of Wavelength to co-host Customer Experience Leaders. It's a series where they interview some of the world's leaders in customer service, including a former operating area manager at Walt Disney. It's a fascinating interview. If you're into customer service, listen to it. Do yourself a favour. The details of the podcast, of course, are in the show notes. Now, Nick, speaking of fascinating interviews, here's mine with RateIt's Michael Momsen. Enjoy. Well, Michael Momsen, welcome. Now, you co-host with Adam Jaffrey of Wavelength, a podcast called Customer Experience Leaders, a branded podcast for RateIt. Now, first, what is it about and what kind of guests do you have on the show?
We're really passionate about delivering great customer experiences, and we're seeing more and more of the world focusing on how is it that we get this organization together or this company together or my team together to deliver great customer experiences. And when we looked at the world of podcasting, of which I'm a big fan, there were a lot of just really industry, agency, jargony filled podcasts that, often had these like long interviews, and there were maybe a few nuggets, but it was pretty hard to find a show that distilled what are the great brands doing around delivering great customer experiences and what are those practical tips that I can take away to start working with my team and my organization to start delivering some of these great customer experiences. So we saw the gap and we thought, let's do it. And so we've had some wonderful guests, from the MD at Pandora. They're a jewelry retailer that's on absolute fire now. They're growing so well, and they do a really great job about customer experience, to some senior folks at Disney, to Country Road. And we really then have a discussion about, well, how do they do this? How do they practically bring great customer experiences to life? And then we distill that with some nice takeaways at the end of the show. So at the end of every podcast, you can walk away with some really actionable tips.
So you really want to own, I suppose, the podcasting or audio space in the field of customer experience. That's why you've dived into podcasting?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we took a look at what are the mega trends that are happening specifically in marketing at the moment. And when I think about the mega trends, there's probably 3 really big things happening right now. The first one is short micro video segments that often will show up on social media. And you see video just blowing up, right? Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all these platforms. YouTube is blowing up as well in terms of just short, great educational or entertaining, great content on video. And so meaningful video is really interesting. The second one is chat. So customers don't want to pick up the phone anymore. They want to have we're using our WhatsApps and our Facebook messengers and our iMessage, and we want to chat with companies and organizations in the same way. I don't want to sit on hold for 10 minutes with the bank. I always want to fire up an IM or a chat. And then the third mega trend that's happening is really in audio. And we see that with podcast, just in the phenomenal rise of the podcasting stats over the last couple of years. And one of the really interesting things, as you would know, is that podcasting and audio is the only medium that you can consume and the only content that you can consume while you're doing something else. And so we think there's something really interesting in audio. And one of the things is it's very hard to do, right? Like you can go to Fiverr or you can go to any freelance website and get a blog post written up for $2, and so the world doesn't need another crappy blog post, but getting good audio is very, very hard. But when you deliver it well, the engagement is phenomenal. And, we really see that as a unique space for us to be able to, sort of get in early. Almost we sort of thought about it as like being part of the early days of Instagram. If you try to go onto Instagram now and get 1 million followers and be an influencer, it's very, very hard because the space is so noisy and there's lots of people there. But we're in this sort of golden window of audio where there's not really a lot of great stuff out there. It is growing, but it's not like there's, 15 to 30 other really fantastic customer experience podcast shows that are, really distilled and are all doing the same thing. So we saw that as a really unique opportunity to get in early, build what we like to think of as a tribe, build a tribe of listeners and people who believe what we believe and really, have that passionate dialogue. And then from that, only good things will happen. So we don't have a commercial outcome in mind. We're not trying to sell on the show. We barely talk about RateIt or what it is that we do. But we believe in if we build this tribe around giving them practical tips, then they'll come along for the ride with us. And, if that turns into a commercial relationship at some point, great. But we're first and foremost really focused on building a community of like-minded people around how do we do the practical things to deliver these really great customer experiences.
It's a long-term game that you're seeing with this.
Yeah, exactly. It's nothing more frustrating for me as a podcast listener when I see a show spin up and then they do 5 episodes or 15 episodes and it just falls away, or they start doing weekly and then all of a sudden there's a gap for a whole bunch of months. And so, yeah, like if you're going to commit to a relationship, which you often frankly do when you start listening and subscribing to a podcast because you really build that connection, it's very important. And we took the view that we don't want to do seasons. I think there's something to be said about high polished content that does it in seasons. But for us, we wanted a regular rhythm of great shows. And so, yeah, we committed to basically fortnightly forever. And we're really looking forward to bringing that down to weekly. And, who knows, we can maybe even aspire to get to daily at one point.
It's interesting how you mentioned the other mega trends that you see, and one of them being video, which is normally, a minute or 2 or 3 perhaps. But podcasting, well, yours are up to 45 minutes. Yet we're told how little people's attention spans are quite limited. But podcasts prove that they're not really, and people are looking for deeper conversations.
Well, I think our attention is limited when we've got a screen in front of our face or when we're trying to do something else, because there's many things competing for that attention on that screen. But when you flick on audio when you're driving or you're doing some gardening or you're going for a run, then that's a wonderful space to have a more long-form bits of content and engagement. And we're constantly blown away by the stats on our podcast in terms of the listenership. Apple's released some new stats where you can see where people drop off in the show. And I forget the exact stats, but it's upwards of 90% who start one of our shows, go all the way to the end. It's just phenomenal, right? So it's not even like we're seeing people just listen to the first couple of minutes and then bomb out. They're actually staying with us, for that entire ride.
And who's your audience? Who are you hoping are listening to it?
Yeah, we've been blown away by the response, actually. Like, we find that we have what we call CX pros, so customer experience professionals, join the listener base, which is fantastic. So this is someone who may work at a bank and they're actually in the customer experience team and they're focused on initiatives and programs to do with customer experience. So we're seeing this as a field continue to grow, and a lot of companies, like we're doing some work with Harvey Norman as an example, and they've just created the chief customer officer, right? And then they've started building a team around that, around customer experience. And so we're seeing a lot of people move into those roles, and they're really starved for great content. And so they come along for the ride, which is great. We actually have quite a lot of small, medium business owners who are just really passionate about delivering great service. And they're constantly thinking, well, how can I get my team behind this? What can I actually, I'm going to get my team together next week. How can I ensure that they're always on their A game? How can I ensure that everyone's always delivering a great service? And so they're looking for great content and great practical tips. And then the final one that we see is people in large organizations who may not have the customer experience title. Maybe they're in a sales role, maybe they're in a marketing role, and they're just really passionate about this stuff, right? Like they're really passionate and they really care about whatever it is that they're doing. Maybe they're in the finance team and they're really passionate about delivering a great experience for their customers. And they're really interested in, well, how do the other big brands do it? How do they bring these complicated things together of all these different silos and all these different processes? How do they do that? And how can I think about infusing some of that back into my day job? And so we see a lot of the corporate users who may not necessarily be in a customer experience role, but that are really passionate about this topic, which is really wonderful.
And they're potential clients for you, is that right?
So yes, like we obviously hope that some of them, if they have a problem where they'd like to get more in the moment customer experience feedback and run some clever analysis on that they at least engage with us and we have the opportunity to have a seat at the table and see if we can help them out. But we're not obsessively going, how many leads did we get each week? We see this as a long-term play in building both the relationship with the broader community, but also, how we think about our brand and what it is that we want to be about. But yeah, of course, we'd love to ensure that we pick up some new customers out of it. Actually, one of the interesting things that I didn't expect to happen was that we've actually picked up a couple of employees from it. So I interviewed someone, actually, she's on our current episode, which we just released. We recorded a couple of months ago, and she was so fantastic. She spoke so well about design thinking and all these topics. I was like, oh my God, I need to hire this person. And so we kicked off a conversation about potentially joining the team. So I wouldn't have expected the podcast show would have been a great way for hiring talent. But and we're seeing that as well. Like we had some senior guys from Twitter reach out to us saying, we love the show, and then they're wanting to talk about some things. And so I think the ability to be connected with people in the industry, where it leads to, whether it's a commercial relationship, they become a customer, whether they become a partner or, gosh, they become an employee, we'll let those things naturally happen as it makes sense. But we really see this as a wonderful platform for us to kick off that conversation and really be known as a community of coming together of like-minded people around let's build greater customer experiences.
So already there, you've saved tens of thousands of dollars on recruiting costs.
I know, right? Yes, Adam keeps reminding me of that.
So it's paying for itself already. Now, tell us of the logistics. So you're in Perth and co-host Adam's in Melbourne. How do you get it together when you're on other ends of the continent?
And often our guests are in the US or they're not in the same room with us.
Right.
Yeah, we've now got this pretty well down pat, and obviously props out to Adam and the team at Wavelength to putting this together. Actually, one of the things that we said when we started this initiative was like, if we're going to have a customer experience show, then we need the guest experience to be, really freaking amazing, right? So we put a lot of effort into thinking about the onboarding process when we reach out to someone, when they come on board, what tools they need to have in terms of microphones and software and how to get it all ready, and the pre-interview process and the post-interview. So we thought quite deeply about that.
And the people that you're interviewing are very well known in the industry and influencers in their own right. So that's the best marketing that you could ask for, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately we could do a podcast or we could write a blog that says, here's Mike's ideas of 3 things you need to do to increase your customer experience. Or we could go talk to the guys at Nike and say, what do you do every day to deliver a great customer experience? Let's hear those stories. And what are those practical takeaways? I know which one that I'd rather listen to or what I would rather, consume in terms of content wise. So yeah, we try to keep the balance between great brands. So, the Disneys and the Officeworkses and the Pandoras, a nice little mix of global and local, so great brands. But then we also want to speak to great industry leaders as well.
Well, it's been almost 12 months now of doing these podcasts. Any lessons you've learnt or any challenges you've overcome that you'd like to share?
Out of the gate, we were very focused on having a fantastic launch. And we saw a fantastic launch as getting a little bit of PR and having some sort of milestone. And so we put a big effort on having all the downloads happen in a short period of time. So we didn't tell anyone about the show. And then we went boom. And then we went out to all our contacts and, everyone to like download the show. And what that did is in the period of the opening week was it got us into the top 10 on the iTunes chart. So that was a pretty big deal for like and that was just using our own network, right? That without any advertising or anything like that. I think we did that really well and how we amplified that on LinkedIn. And we put a very specific focus on, let's maximize the show's awareness on LinkedIn. So I think that worked really well. I think the way that we thought about guest outreach and how we really positioned it almost as a sales process. So we thought about it as pipeline. We thought about it as when I reach out to, the chief customer experience officer at Officeworks, why the hell would he even want to come on our show? What's in it for him? How to sort of position that and take them on the journey. And that sort of enabled us to get a lot of great high quality guests very early, which I think is very important. The final thing that we focused on that I think we did well is really getting a lot of reviews and ratings early on. And so, we, in our first couple of months, we, upwards of 50 plus, 5-star ratings and reviews. And that obviously does well in terms of how we show up on Apple Podcasts. So for example, if you actually just whip out your iPhone and you type in customer, like we're the first show that comes up. And then certainly if you type in customer experience globally, like we're the first show that comes up. And so I think we did that really well. The things that, we learned that could have been better is still very much around like tech and process. I think the industry is still quite early on this. We had Zencaster teething issues. We tried Zoom. We've had issues like, going back with Skype, local recordings and just all the tech to bring it all together. And certainly in a remote scenario as well, it creates a few extra challenges. But, we played with the idea of sending out a high quality mic to someone, or do we just get them to, use their iPhone, or do we get them to, plug in a headset into their computer? Like, and these are often like quite busy executives, right? And so like we had the head of customer experience at Optus as an example. I mean, the guy finds out about the podcast interview, 5-10 minutes before, runs into a meeting room and he's like, all right, what do I do? Like, what number do I call? So how do you ensure that it's a very easy experience for them as well as getting great high quality audio?
Final question, Michael. For anyone else, companies or not-for-profits or thought leaders, anyone listening to this, what advice would you give to them looking to get into podcasting?
I definitely think if you have a marketing budget over $100,000 a year, you should seriously consider what your voice strategy is. Ideally, it's podcasting, but just in general, you should be thinking about voice. And when you do go down that path, don't tinker at the edges, do it properly. If there's one thing that we've learned is investing in great production and great editing really pays off. And the way that it pays off is that you've built a piece of content, this 20-minute episode, this 30-minute episode, whatever it may be, that people really, really love. And they listen from start to finish and they subscribe and they can't wait to the next episode and they tell all their friends. I mean, we've had weeks where we've been doubling our listenership, week on week compounding. And the value of that, if I was to say, how much would you pay as an organization to have several thousand of people fill a hotel lobby room and see the two of you on stage chat about whatever topic for the next hour or half an hour, and the audience is fully engaged from start to finish? That's incredibly valuable from a branding standpoint and from a marketing standpoint. And so I think if you're going to do audio and you're going to do podcasting, I think do it well. I think having someone doing it as a hack for 5 hours a week here and there, like it can work, but I don't think you're going to build anything that's meaningful. So my main advice would be you should seriously be considering audio in your strategy. And when you do go, yep, let's do this thing, I think do it well and do it properly, because there's only going to be more and more podcasts. We're at the early stage of Instagram. We're at the early stage of the App Store. There's only going to be more and more podcasts that are going to be flooding, and there's going to be a lot of crap, frankly. And so really great content, meaningful content that's well produced, that sounds fantastic, that's well edited, will rise to the top, and it will be worth every penny.
Well, I can't disagree with you there. Michael Momsen, thank you very much for your time and good luck with RateIt.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, Michael is another great example of a smart business operator who totally understands the benefits to his business of being involved in a podcast, and he's doing it really well. And I totally agree with Michael that the world doesn't need any more $2 blogs, and he's spot on that we're in what he refers to as the golden window of audio. And Michael said that he's still quite early to the podcasting space when it comes to a branded podcast. He compared it to Instagram and Facebook, where the market's just flooded with every brand having a go. But it's not too late, is it, Chris, for brands to jump on now and reap the benefits of building a tribe?
It's not too late, but I mean, why a lot of companies move into Instagram and Twitter and what have you is it's so easy to do. But I think people are just getting sick to death with clickbait, inane comments on Twitter that really doesn't improve your lives. And I think people really do want to go deep diving into their interests. You know, that's why tribes are being created, because it's not surface bullshit. This podcasting allows you, more than anything, to really get involved and learn about stuff.
And I think the reason Michael's podcast for his business RateIt is doing so well is because he understands the importance of having really good guests, like the likes of Walt Disney and Pandora and I think the BlackBerry.
That's right, world leaders in their thinking. They have real life experience, business experience that you can draw upon. Again, something you can't get much from a blog or from a Twitter feed.
And they can give so much more advice than Michael can from his own experience. You know, he's drawing on the advice of the leaders in that space.
And what a network that he's creating.
Absolutely.
And tying his brand with their brands. It's fantastic.
And importantly, he's not trying to sell anything directly. His aim, which is the right aim, is to provide value and attach his brand to that value. And I know, Chris, you have some strong feelings about brands not making podcasts all about themselves.
If an aim in a podcast should be to get an aha moment from the interview, so your audience can go away and implement practical things from that podcast, or go away and think about what they've heard. People are becoming so cynical about what they consume in the media. You know, what's the ulterior motive? That they don't want an advertisement anymore. All you need to do, all that's enough, is to have your brand wrapped around a good conversation.
Well, that's it for another episode of Be Podcasting. For more about us and how we can help you use audio content to build engagement, go to be.com.au. From all of us at Be Media Production, thanks so much for listening.
Be Podcasting is produced by the team at Be Media Production. Managing Director Nick Schildberger, Executive Producer Heather Dawson, Producer Chris Ashmore, and I'm Peter Letts, Director of Audio. For more about us, go to be.com.au.